Hi everyone, welcome. It's Thursday night, so hope you all have had a good week. This week we're going to talk about binding. So I'm going to show you first how I do binding using, you know, my favorite stuff, glue. So we're going to go through the traditional one. I'm going to show you how to do a single ply binding, because binding I usually do is double binding, which means it's double thickness. The reason that they did that is because they said that fabric wears at the corners and on the binding first, that the binding is the first thing to wear out, and if you had a double layer, that does protect the ends of the batting and the top and the bottom a little bit better. Although single fold binding was done traditionally. They didn't do double binding. It was done, and it could be bias or not bias. It can be straight or grain or straight. Doesn't really matter unless it's a curve. If you are going around a curve, it has to be bias, or otherwise it's never going to look good. But I mostly use straight or grain. I don't see any difference in how one wears over the other. Both wear pretty well. And so up until about the 1950s, nothing but single ply binding was used. So we're going to do that. We're going to do the wide binding, also known as the Amish binding, where you don't have mitered corners, but it's wide binding, single fold as well, so it's not doubled. We're going to do another method. It's a double binding, but I probably wouldn't use this one for regular bed quilts, but I would for wall hangings and things. It's a sort of modified halfway single, halfway double binding. That is actually the inventor of that was Edith Starr, and she's a very famous and very gifted competition quilter. You see her stuff in the shows all the time. And then last but not least, I'm going to show you how to do a two-sided bindings, where it's one color on one side and one on the other. Yeah, we're going to go for an hour. We may have to extend this till next week because it's 5 different types of binding. So I don't want to short you and do things like too quickly. So I want to make sure you understand. Binding is a lot of people have trouble with bindings. And when I first started doing show quilting, my first big critique was in the binding, and I just heard from one of our customers that had entered something in one of the local competitions, and her comment was, need to work on the binding. They didn't particularly tell her what was wrong with the binding. They just said she needs to work on it. Like, how helpful is that? Doesn't necessarily have to do this binding as if you were doing a show. They're going to look for certain things when you enter a quilt into a show, but these are also good practices. For one thing, you want the binding to be even on both sides. So if it's a 1/2 inch binding on the front, the back of it should be 1/2 inch also. The other thing they like to see, if you do miters, they like to see those sewn shut. They also don't like to see the start and the stops. And by that I mean, when it goes around the corner, can you tell where you started? Those are the things that show quilt judges look for. However, they're good practices so that you will have better binding, especially if you're doing an heirloom quilt or a baby quilt or something that's going to be preserved through the generations, which I like to hope my kids would, because like finding this under the dog, I'm going to be upset. So anyway, couple things that I use that most people don't use. Well, really, that's only one thing that I use that most people don't, and that's this stuff. It's Elmer's, I'll have to turn it around, Elmer's washable school glue. Go figure, right? Stuff's great. So anyway, that's what I use, because another thing that can go wrong with bindings is that they will cup at the end, you know, on the corners, that when you see it, this top here sort of cups up like that. You know, it sort of gives you a little curl at the corners. That's usually because your binding is stretched on when you're sewing it. So that can be helped by using a walking foot. But if you're using this glue, you don't have to. And I'll also use the Elmer's School Glue in the stick form as well. The reason you want to use why I recommend only the Elmer's. I don't know about other brands. The Elmer's has been tested extensively. It's made of starch. It doesn't have acids in it. It completely washes out. And the other thing is it's non-toxic, and it's, it's so gentle, kids eat it. Kids in school, kindergartners love this stuff. So, and this one here is the purple one that goes on purple. Supposedly, the Fons and Porter one works as well. I just find that a little more expensive. I do have it, but I do use it. Let's start with the regular, typical one. This is not pretty stuff, okay? And that's okay. Another thing you're going to need is a good iron and a pressing mat with some stuff all over it. Okay, so I'm going to get out my pressing mat. Ironing board usually works really well too. Okay, I've got my 1/4 inch foot on my machine. I'm going to be using a straight stitch. I'm just going to be using plain white thread. And I have put the glue in this container. I have this one and I have this one. This is an oiler. Don't ever use it for oiling, but you can buy the empty oilers, and that's what this one is good for. It has a nice thin tip, and you can get it at model airplane shops where they make models. That works really good. This one is from Roxanne. It had Roxanne glue in it. It doesn't anymore. So what I do is I unscrew the top and refill it. So this pink thing comes out and you can refill it. So, which I need to do real soon here because that probably doesn't have much in it. Here I have my quilt, and I have squared it up, and you can see I've quilted this. Just nothing fancy, just regular quilting. Okay, and then I have folded. How to determine how much you need is that when you look at this, you have, I'm going to use a 3/8 inch seam on here, and that you can always add that up. So you have 3/8 times 2 here, 3/8 times 2 here, and 3/8 times 2 over a little bit. Okay, so and then I usually add 1/8 of an inch. I think I'd cut this like 2 1/8 because it's doubled. Remember, it's doubled. Okay, so now what I do is I'm going to fold it in half, and usually I will spray starch this and so that it sort of sticks together a little bit. Okay, the other thing I do is I'm going to fold one end like that, 145 degrees, so I have that folded over, and give it a good press. Okay, now I usually want to make sure that I leave lots of room, so I'm going to start this one really down low. So I am going to put in glue. This one's only going to be a little bit, because this one I'll go all the way around. Okay, and probably my join, I want to plan my join on the side. I like my joins to be mitered. I don't like straight. Anytime you see a straight line, your eye is drawn to it, and you'll be able to point that out really quickly where you stopped and started. So I'm putting this right at the edge of my fabric, and I've squared it off. I'm going to heat set it down because the glue doesn't stick unless you heat set it, and see, now it sticks. Okay, then I'm going to take this and fold it so that over there you have a straight line, and if you want to, you can always put one of these things, ruler. Okay, so right there at the edge. Okay, so now I'm going to give that a heat set. Press it down. Okay, then you go to your machine. Okay, now I'm going to fold this over, and I usually will pin it because I have my sewing machine in another room. I'm going to use black Sharpie markers so you can see it, although you probably won't see it when it's finished anyway, because I'm going to mark this line right where the fold is. Okay. Now we're going to go to the machine. I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to set my stitch length at about 2 millimeters. Okay, and I'm just going, I don't need to back tack. I am going to sew a little more than 3/8 or a little more than 1/4. Actually, on the foot is shaped like, let's see if I can draw that. So it goes like this, and then it's got a little narrow one here, and then this comes out like that. That's what the foot looks like. So this is the 1/4 line that I match. This one is an extra 1/8. I'm going to sew right in the middle, so it's a slightly less than 1/8 of an inch. Look, it's like a 1/16 of an inch, and I'm just going to go straight until my needle hits the line. And because it's dark, I can see it, and the lights are good. Okay, then I turn a corner, or go straight and sew off. Okay, then I'm going to come back to the ironing board. Okay. Then I fold it back. I'm going to just barely see the edge right there. You want to line that up just straight. And then I'm going to give it a press. Okay, now I'm going to apply the glue to this side. So I'm going all the way across from one end to the other. Can you see how I put the glue? Just a little bead. You don't need a lot. Don't over glue it. You'll be sorry. It'll be gummy. Okay? Now you set this down so that it's nice and even, but don't go anywhere until you heat set it. This glue does not stick until you heat set it. Okay? And then do the same thing that we did here. Take it across. So there's my, see, there's my corner. Put that right there in the corner. Go straight across so you have a straight line going this way. Heat set again. Okay. And I'm going to, yes, I'm going to mark it. Yeah, I'm not keeping this. I might just put it between heavy dishes or something. So, okay, and now to the machine. And I'm just going to start on the end. Again, I'm leaving that, I call this a generous 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going straight across until my needle hits that line, this line that I drew right here. And I want to stop that needle right on the line. There, needle down, turn to the edge. Okay. Well, I'm going to cheat and just do these without the gluing, just so that we can save some time. I can already feel it wanting to slip around. Okay, and then I will take that, fold it. I got it. I can't see that. There. Across. And then same thing here. I'm going to get that quite perfect, and you're going to see, I want you to see that. I did not get that not perfectly to the edge. It's a little bit over. That's okay. We're going to see, even that little bit, what a difference it makes. Because it will make a difference. So what happens when you get cupping is that you end up pulling this ever so slightly, or even the weight of it. And that came out. Alright. And the last one, I'm only going to sew just a tiny bit, and then I'll show you how to join this. because this is what's really nice is in the join. Okay, so I'm starting at the edge, and I'm only going to go a couple inches because I want to leave plenty of room. Okay, now let's join this together. I have this like that. What I'm going to do is just lay them flat. I'm going to put a bead of glue right here on one part of the fold. Oh, don't do this. Come on. There we go. Okay. I'm going to lay this across, straight on the top, and heat set it down. Okay. And I need some scissors. Okay. And okay, I'm going to cut. I have excess, so here's the end of that 45-degree angle, so I'm going to cut down a little bit. Don't need that excess. Okay. Going to open this up right here, and I'm going to put glue on this inside edge. Just a tiny, it is almost nothing. Fold it inside, nice and firm. Make sure it's good and together, nice and flat. Heat set that. Careful. Okay, I'm going to open it up like this. Going to open this side. You want to be careful because you don't want to pull it apart. I want to find the join. There it is. So you carefully open up and see where that fold is where I'm going to sew, which is right there. To the machine. I usually will take the two uncut where it's not sewn and clip or pin them together, mostly so that they're not fighting me. Okay, then I open this up, and you want to be gentle because you don't want to pull it apart, because then you'll just have to go right back and there we go. Okay, so I don't usually try to open it up too much because I don't want to unglue it. So I usually start at this end where I can see it, and I'm going to sew right on that line to the middle fold. Then I can straighten out the second half, and that way you're not stressing the seam. And sew off. Usually I'll pull open my glue and sew it, and then open it. And I will take that and cut the excess off so that I only have about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and finger press it open. Okay, release the pin, fold it over, just lay it flat. Now you can take it to the ironing board and re-glue it, usually, because this is only a short distance from here to here. So I usually don't. I usually just simply over stitch about a 1/2 inch. Go to the other side, and there we go. When I fold it like this, then when it will meet, see, it meets right at the stitching line. And usually I will take I like them hand stitched. Okay, I will hand stitch them. If you are going to machine stitch, okay, you're going to make this piece another 1/8 inch wider than what I've done, because in that case, instead of it touching, you can see where it was sewn, you're going to overlap it. Okay. Say you're not totally perfectly even with your stitches, and then you find a spot, because another problem is, like, let's just say, okay, this is short, and from the front you can feel a lump of batting. That's not a good thing. That's going to wear right there. So you want this to overlap just evenly. So if you are machine stitching it from the front, you want it to overlap by 1/8 of an inch. And another time, this is also a good place, and that's usually when I'll take these Okay, and I will just simply take a little of the glue stick right there. Now you don't want much. If you are going to hand stitch this, you put too much, you know what's going to happen. You're going to end up being very hard to needle through. So this I only do mostly when I'm machine stitching it down. So then you press it. And see, it stays. You don't have to use pins or anything. And then just a little bit, and I'm just using inside the seam allowance. I'm not touching the quilt itself at all. Okay. I don't usually try to press, where'd it go? I don't usually try to press those miters just right. Oh, you can't see that. There we go. And I don't usually try to press the miters. I'll press between the miters, and then I will hand manipulate those miters as I come to them. Although you could, if I were doing machine sewing, and I'm only going to press these two sides down. Okay. Alrighty. And look, you get really nice miters. They're a little, if you have it rounded. Where's one of them that I knew I did bad? I don't remember. Let's see. Well, sometimes when you get they're a little rounded. You know how I didn't have them quite right? They're a little rounded, or they can be overly bulky. And so now if I were machine stitching, I would just stitch in the ditch all the way around. This is the one that I didn't do right here. Okay, see how that's not perfect? See how this went in like that? That's not a good thing. If you're, I mean, it's okay, but if it were for a show, I would have to fix that just right. But I don't do show quilts anymore. Those are retired. Okay, now, the method that Editus Star used, I thought is a takeoff on this, and I'm just going to do a little bit of that one. Is this it? Yeah. You have the same thing, except you use the same width, but one side is cut 1/4 inch shorter. So what you do is, instead of using 2 inches, you're going to go at 1 3/4, and you're going to fold this 1/4 inch exposing, because you're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do one corner here, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, so I'm still going to glue, folks. That's just how. Well, when I don't, I'm usually sorry. Okay, heat set it down. And the advantage to this is that it's going to give you flatter corners. A lot of times, especially if you're dealing with a thicker cotton, those miters on the corners are really bulky. This cuts out lots of layers. Okay, so I've done the same thing here. Where'd my pen go? Here it is. Going to mark that so you can see. I'm going to sew it, well, not here. I'm going to open it up and just sew it here on one layer. Okay. Okay, I want to open this up like I'm doing a single layer. And I'm going to sew 1/4 inch accurately. This one is going to be cut actually a little smaller. Again, I'm going to stop right on that line and sew off. Okay. I'm going to come back here. This time I'm not going to pull that out so I don't sew it. I'll do 2 of them just in case. And yes, I'm not using the glue. Oops. Same thing here. I didn't press it. Wait a minute. Just make that even. Make a little fold, and I can see I can't see the little fold. I can barely see the little fold there. I'm going to make some marks. take this and pull that layer out of the way so I don't catch it. Okay, so now when you go to fold this, let's see, am I in focus? Yes. Now when I fold this, this is going to fold to this line. Then you're going to bring it over. Let's see. It's a little hard, to me it's a little harder to manipulate, but it's doable. See, this isn't cap. What I would do here, which she did not do, is because this is making me crazy right here, I would probably, before I turn the corner, I would heat set that down. Glue all these down. There. I'm just gonna, there, set that. As if it were stuck. Okay. So now, when we turn this over, it's going to stay. And I'll just, where's my clips? I'll just clip it for now. You see, and this goes over on this side. And you clip it. And you get a much flatter, oh yeah, a lot flatter miter. It is much tighter, much flatter. That I do have to say. Great idea. And a little bit more here. A little too much glue. Now, like I said, here's one where, because it's 1/4 of an inch, I'm feeling no batting right there. You know what the solution is to that? Before you close this up and sew it, take a 1/4 inch strip or 1/8 of an inch strip of batting and stuff it before you sew it. No one's going to know. That's actually what I did to those show quilts years ago when they told me what was wrong with my batting, and luckily Shoko told me what was wrong with my batting, because she's an amazing gal and so talented. And see, really nice miters, and they're, well, you can, the only thing is you can see where the mark is that I did, but that's the ink. You don't use Sharpie markers to mark your quilts. Who would do such a thing? But this is a much flatter corner than this one. You can even see on camera that it's much thinner. See, you got a lot of bulk right here. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers of fabric right in that little corner. And you want to make sure your miters are going in opposite directions. So if this one is going from right to left, this one, you wouldn't put it left to right. You would do it the opposite so that the bunching would be a little less. But this is a lot flatter. I'm going to have to try that. The only concern I have is the fact that there's a layer loose inside, which I think if it with heavy use, it would shift on you. What you could do is, if you did this wider, you could put a decorative stitch or something else in there that would hold it. I would have to try it and wash it and see what happens. For a wall hanging, this would be perfect because you don't wash a wall hanging a lot. Okay, now for the single fold butt. With the Amish binding, okay, how you join binding together, again, a lot of people would sew these two together like this. I would not. I would put one, when I'm joining my binding together, I just fold somewhat of a 45-degree angle. I'm going to put the glue here. Okay. I'm going to put them right sides, both right sides facing downward, and heat set that into place. Now you know it's nice and straight. and then you sew on this fold right here. Just simply sew on the fold, just like we did the last thing. And now that gives you, I do this for borders, I'll do it for binding, because the eye cannot follow a diagonal line. It will follow a straight, a horizontal or a vertical line. It won't, your eyes are harder for them to focus. I've lost them. There it is. Focus on a diagonal line, so you won't see where it starts. I use this for borders. I use this for binding. I use this method for matching plaids. I use this glue for a lot of things. Okay, and then I cut and then fold these open. Now, if this was a double binding, then here's where you go to fold it in half. Okay, so anyway, and the same thing, I'm going to start folding this over, and this will be my start and stop. And we're going to start and stop the same way we did before. Okay, leaving a big long tail. Okay, now, where did the quilt? Here it is. Now, what's different with this is that you are not going to trim your quilt, you know, trim and square it up with the rotary cutter. You're going to trim it, square it up with a line. You're going to draw your line because you want your batting and backing and front to extend beyond. Now, when you are quilting, I usually say, if I were quilting this, and my quilting, I keep my quilting motif at least a ½ an inch away from where I think the edge is going to be, because if I put 1/4 inch binding, I don't want the binding to go over top of the quilting, but that's in planning. So anyway, you would do the same thing here. I'm going to start. So you draw it, and you're going to not trim it. You're going to draw your edge where you think your edge is going to be, and you square it up that way. And usually you've washed your quilt and everything, because when you wash your quilt, they sort of, it helps to go ahead and square them up and block them with, just like you do knitting. Okay, where this goes. Okay, and you do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to do this. I start here. Now I've got a little extra that I need, and I'm going to put the edge of my fabric right here. You do not want to use a friction marker for this, and I didn't. I used a Sharpie because you want to see where the edge is, and I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch line. And the same thing here, only over here I'm going to, I don't know if you can see that. And it's hard to see. Oh, right here. I'll do it. Okay, I line that up here. I'm going to line this up. I'm just going to finger press it for now with the edge of that line, because that's going to be my cut line, we think. But at least it's an even spot. And again, I'm going to mark the miter so you can see. Okay? I'm going to sew an accurate 1/4 inch or 3/8 or whichever size you use. And I'm usually going to use a 1/4 with this. I'm going to go closer. So on the line, there we go, and go off. Okay. Again, I'm going to come over here, and usually I press it, then put that right at the edge and press it. I'm going to cheat and just do it though. And you don't have to worry if you're getting it accurately. I just need to. Okay. Now, if you are brave, you can use this line and the marks on your foot, but I'm not that good. Okay, I'll do one more. Okay, and the last one. again. I'm not going to glue it, but I would glue this. Yes, it's a pain in the neck to have to constantly glue it. However, you can make up for it in speed because I'm not having to sew so carefully. I can literally rip down the seam. Just go. And here. Okay, that's good enough. Alrighty. Okay, then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to, let me move this here, and I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to put, I can see, although it's hard for you to see it, there's my stitching. I want to put this line right here, right on top of that stitching, and trim. And I am not caring about where I did on the quilt, but this is more accurate. My stitching is where it's important. Same thing here. I have my stitching line. I'm going to put that 1/4 inch line right on the stitching line and trim afterwards. That's good enough for there. And now you would take your you would fold this over 1/4 inch. Usually you'll finger press it down, but it doesn't have to be exact. You're going to judge how much you're going to fold over by how much you need. So when I'm over here, I would finger press that with your fingernail. Okay. Let's just say where did I go first? Over? Oh, I didn't cut that one. Okay, we start over here. Okay, so I know fold this over, and so if it's a little thicker than I thought, I don't have to have this 1/4 inch. I can make that right where we know, because we use the measurement, that between here and here is 1/4 inch. So if this is not a 1/2 inch, which it could not be, it's possible, you can come even short this out, okay? And then pin it or clip it. I'm a big clipper. I like clips. Same thing with the miter. I usually will fold that miter before I turn, just to pre-fold it a little bit. Make sure it matches. Press that down here, and then now I'm going to come over here. Usually I'll do and now see, this miter is very nice. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that is really nice. That feels so, it's nice and thin, and that miter is just awesome. Look at that. On the back it's perfect, and on the front it's perfect. Sometimes with double you get little tucks right here and little pleats and stuff, and you don't want them there. Oh yeah, I can see why they did this. It also saves fabric. I'm all for that. Like I said, it doesn't wear much differently than the double, but that is nice. Very nice. Oh, I'm gonna have to do this. Oh shoot, right. Where I got this one from was from it was from the Quilt Show, which is Ricky Timms at Anderson. This is a master quilter. Her name is Gwen Marston, M-A-R-S-T-O-N. She is absolutely, I mean, she's a seasoned, quilt judge and everything, and this is perfect. It can't get any better than that. Yeah, wow. I'm impressed. Let's answer some questions. Why do I not want your quilting to go to the edge of the quilt? Because with the binding, you're gonna cut off the motif. If you quilted to the edge, it would go up underneath here, and you're gonna lose part of your motif. So you wanna, now you can stipple, you can run your binding over top of stippling, but if you've got a motif, keep it a 1/2 inch away from the edge of your quilt, because your binding is going to take up at least 1/4 inch, usually 3/8. I prefer 3/8. This is awfully thin binding for me. So yeah, that's awfully thin. I like it 3/8, which is a little bit thicker. So if I leave it a 1/2 inch, I'm not going to cut off the motifs. So that's why. So that was a great question, Jenny. So until then, happy sewing, everyone. Bye.